All right, guys, so we are finishing up this video on the Battle of Kapyong, the Korean War, Forgotten Battle, Forgotten War. And if you haven't seen part one, I urge you to watch it. But we are in a very precarious position right now where the Australians have, at the fear of being overrun, had to abandon some of their entrenched positions on their hill and retreat. And now they've been ordered to take it back on the promise that the American 5th Cavalry is coming. So let us continue.
At Stan Connolly, this action will prove costly.
I was wondering what was going to happen when we got to the trench. Training never quite takes you to the point of leaping into trenches or coming to such close quarters. I could hear the bullets whistling past my ears and I thought, my turn is not that
bayonets.
far off. Sure enough.
Oh gosh, so I guess it's going to be hand-to-hand
I
combat.
was knocked completely off my feet by a round that drilled a hole right through the front. Bullets whistling past my ears and I thought,
Backed up a second.
my turn is
I was
not
talking
that
over
far
it.
off. Sure enough, I was knocked completely off my feet by a round that drilled a hole right through the front of my right thigh and came out the back, taking off much of my buttock.
Oh God.
I didn't know if I could get up, but I quickly decided that I'd better try and get out of there because I could hear the Chinese speaking to each other in the trench, and I knew there were quite a lot of them.
Fierce hand-to-hand combat, trench by trench. They cleared way through the enemy. Even more enemy were entrenched on a knoll further on. Their might and aggressiveness upset the Chinese. Some openly fled, the majority remained and fought to the death.
Oof.
In the terror of the Australians' bayonet charges, 3 Australians and 81 Chinese are killed.
That ratio is, well, it speaks for itself, doesn't it?
Bruce Ferguson, the Australians' commanding officer, utilizing several of the US tanks, decides to bring forward medical support and ammunition. It is his first visit to the front. Ferguson arranges for the wounded to be ferried out on the tanks. Before returning to his headquarters, he tells O'Dowd that the US 5th Cavalry are still on their way. The Australians must hold. What the tanks do not bring is food and water.
We always had Fergie up on a pedestal. We thought he was a good commander. And quite rightly so too, because in the early days he was. At Kapyong, it was a different matter.
Sir.
Sometime after lunch, that we did not eat, did not have, Ferguson came up on the air to me and said there would be no one coming to my assistance, and I could have a shot at getting out.
He was a very capable commander. You could see the size of ground well, could read a map well, and in fact was very, very capable. His orders were very clear. Where the hell he was at Kapyong, I don't know. He certainly wasn't in the battle area.
Out.
Surrounded and without the support of the US 5th Cavalry, O'Dowd knows that they cannot survive another night.
Forget about the road, no go.
I wonder why the US 5th Cavalry was delayed. I wonder what was going on with that.
We'll go the ridge
The road
line.
too dangerous,
Bad news.
he picks a narrow 4-kilometre ridgeline for his withdrawal. New Zealand guns are ordered to deliver both smoke and high explosive to cover the Australians moving out. They will commence fire at precisely 4 p.m.
So I'm really curious about what's going on over at on the other hill with the Canadians right now, or is it nothing, or is that coming another wave?
With only 40 minutes left, the diggers await the arrival of New Zealand artillery. which marks the beginning of their withdrawal. Then, disaster strikes.
I saw a US Marine Corsair line up and start a run in on our position. I saw the big silver bomb leave the plane and watched it fall. The napalm exploded and took all the oxygen out of the air. I felt like I was just breathing heat.
Friendly fire is just happens in war. It's tragic. Just feels very tragic.
I couldn't tell how many of our men had been hit by it, but I knew the devastating effect of these bombs, and well, I was extremely distressed by it. But there was nothing we could do, of course, nothing.
Already wounded in the forehead, I must have looked a sight. Sitting there, stunned, no doubt feeling a bit sick and sorry for myself. I then saw the most appalling apparition. A man with no flesh, his hands dripping flesh, completely naked. I didn't know who he was. He looked at me and said, "Jesus, Nugget, you're having a bad day."
The napalm strike
Must have been
claims
another
2
shock.
Australian dead and others who will carry the scars for life. Despite the devastation, O'Dowd's men must dig deep. They face a difficult withdrawal through a massed enemy in the dark. A mistake will see them wiped out. The planned 4 p.m. withdrawal is about to commence. The US tanks appear, and with the New Zealand artillery...
So, if I'm getting the timeline of this right, they've been fighting, they fought all through the night before with no support, no artillery, no tanks, no air support, no food, no water. They had to withdraw. They were ordered to take back their positions against an entrenched enemy that outnumbered them, on the suggestion that there would be reinforcements that didn't come, and then fought all through the next day until 4 p.m. And that's where we're finally getting some relief.
assist in covering the Australians as they begin their withdrawal down the ridgeline.
At least they got their S together to coordinate.
Night falls, and the Chinese are quickly after the Australians as they go. By midnight, O'Dowd orders the last group of his men to get across the Kapyong River.
Okay, let it go!
The Canadians above the ford see movement and open fire.
O'Dowd thought that we were firing on his troops, and so ordered us to cease fire. I think we fired for about 5 or 6 minutes. 8 machine guns take care of an awful lot of casualties.
We watched as the Chinese swarmed across, waiting at a shallow ford. Many dropped spread-eagled like tiny water beetles as they were hit.
The Australians have fought for 24 hours. For them, the Battle of Kapyong is over. As they move to the rear, it is the Canadians who form the front line.
When the Australians left, all that was left there was this battalion of understrength, really, 600-700 men. And the Canadians suddenly realized they were alone there. And that's when the colonel said, "Look, guys, we ain't moving. And you're going to stay here, so just focus yourself that there's no pullout. You either beat these guys or you're going to be buried here."
Oh my God. A hold at all costs situation.
It was very uncomfortable, to say the least. You really didn't know what was going to happen. when you go into battle, you cannot think too much about yourself. Otherwise, you begin to lose the sense of what's going on.
The Chinese begin to attack the Canadians.
You know, I'm really loving these perspectives that these gentlemen who fought in this war are giving. We could never understand what it's like to be them, but they're giving some glimpse into it.
How did the Chinese motivate their men to sustain such bravery? In our terms, how did they persuade their troops to commit mass suicide?
For the Chinese, they don't call it the suicide charges. They figure out that if you could charge the enemy in a large group, you could run fast enough to top of the hill, you may have a chance. The victory.
I don't doubt that the Chinese soldiers were brave and dedicated. And I don't know this for sure, but just thinking back to World War II, you know, Stalin had a policy: you don't retreat. If you retreat, we shoot you. You know, you move forward or you're dead. And you know, authoritarian communist regimes like that have ways of motivating their troops, and I'm wondering if something like that was in play here. Don't know if I ever read something like that. I don't remember it, and if any of you do, love to hear it in the comments.
It depends on the people, not the weapon.
Wave after wave, until their numbers became one continuous assault and their bodies littered the battlefield. The sight is one of an almost decapitated body, splurging blood, limbs in death throes, thrashing uselessly. It is a time of victorious relief combined with gut-wrenching fear. Oh my God, please may I never be the victim.
Oof.
Despite the carnage, the Chinese commanders use lulls in the fighting to marshal more and more troops in.
These men came up the hill as though they were ghosts floating. I couldn't discern a single sound. They just kept floating up the hill.
This gentleman has such a good way of describing things. He's very articulate and does a great job at painting a picture with his words.
It is like shooting tin ducks in a gallery. They are so bloody close. I simply cannot miss. It is such a relief to feel victorious, to know that you are actually going to live another day.
We never got out of there because that's why we were told to fix bayonets. So we had to hold no matter what. We're wiped out, Seoul is taken.
So more hand-to-hand combat with bayonets.
War means anger and hatred. You have to feel that to kill someone. You have to get angry before you kill the enemy. If I don't kill the enemy, he will kill me. That's the truth of it.
Damn scary, that's for sure. You don't know if you're going to get a bayonet in you, but you want to get one in him first because you're so close. And a lot of things I know went through my mind. I'm 20 years old. Geez, am I going to see 21?
See that? Oh my. Both that Chinese soldier and this Canadian gentleman expressed basically the same thing. It's kill or be killed.
The next day we found one corporal whose bayonet was through his enemy, and the enemy's bayonet was through him. They both followed what they were ordered to do.
The force of numbers has at last paid off for the Chinese. Kapyong can still be theirs. By 3 a.m. on the third day, one of the Canadian platoons is cut off and overrun. To survive, the Canadians must take an extreme measure. Lieutenant Mike Levy acts quickly. He calls the New Zealanders to direct artillery fire onto his own men. He will attempt to wipe the Chinese off the battlefield.
You have a better chance in your trenches, dug in, than the Chinese have coming in and joining you. And so that was, I think, platoon commanders sort of lusted for the day they could call artillery on themselves. You know, you feel like a big shot, and it sounds lethal. And when the Canadians did it at Kapyong, the New Zealand artillery commander said, you know, Jesus, mate, it's your position. And the captain who orders it said, yeah.
I guess, you know, it's inevitable that you're going to be overrun. And you know the artillery is coming and you're entrenched and you can just hope for the best, but at least prepare for it. But imagine having to make that choice.
They fired thousands and thousands of rounds of ammunition that night. The damn guns were dying just about red hot, with a 25-pounder just getting bung, another one's bunged in, and they just keep firing.
Levy called for that fire to last, and it lasted for 40 minutes because the Chinese just threw wave after wave after wave. And without that close artillery support and the airburst shell, Levy would have been wiped out. To my mind, as far as the Patricias are concerned, Levy won our last battle and the most significant part of the battle at Kapyong.
It was sort of the last stand, you know, the last hope, last chance.
When the dawn arrives, the Chinese have withdrawn, and D Company still controls their area of Hill 677.
Guy with the cigarette. Yeah, smoke 'em if you got 'em. You earned it.
We're now virtually out of ammunition. I have often wondered if the Chinese commanders ever found out how close they came to destroying us.
The slaughter is something I never want to see or experience again. At the time you do it, you're so glad you're alive and you're surviving. But the slaughter of the enemy was just unimaginable. It looked like a slaughterhouse. Sometimes
his name is Lieutenant Hub Gray, you know.
Sometimes it still gives me
Hat off to him.
nightmares.
All of them.
That's how the enemy gets back. Sometimes it still gives me nightmares. That's how the enemy gets back at you when you have your nightmares. They're always worse than the actual battle.
The Battle of Kapyong is over. On Anzac Day 1951, the Canadians bring down their dead. The Commonwealth Brigade has halted the might of the Chinese army and stopped them from streaming south and retaking Seoul.
People still don't know about it. It's a forgotten battle in a forgotten war, largely. But it was I think the key battle that the Commonwealth Division fought in the whole Korean War.
They keep showing that guy and saying he's a journalist. I noticed that his tie are just, it's blue with white stripes. Speaking in a North American accent, I feel like he's American. I'm not really sure, but I like his insights. Well, a forgotten battle and a forgotten war. I'm hoping that enough people watch this, that at least we're reaching some to remind them on Remembrance Day.
The Battle of Kapyong lasted 3 days. The Canadians have lost 10 men killed, the Australians 32, and the New Zealanders 1. Estimates of the Chinese dead vary between 1,000 and 4,000 soldiers.
Every life matters, and every soldier that dies in war deserves remembrance. But it's just amazing that more weren't lost up against those odds.
The Americans, responding to the importance of the Commonwealth Brigade's stand, award the Canadians and Australians with an American presidential citation for their action at Kapyong. The New Zealanders are overlooked.
That sucks.
Lieutenant Mike Levy, who won the final battle.
Sorry about that, Kiwis.
For the Patricias, receives no recognition from the Canadian government.
Oh.
You know, so many things happen in battle that oversights occur. You hear so many instances in battle where somebody did something very significant, somebody else gets the award. It just happened.
Good attitude,
The
I guess.
Australian commander, Lieutenant Colonel Bruce Ferguson, is awarded the Distinguished Service Order for his command of the Battle of Kapyong. Major Ben O'Dowd is overlooked.
O'Dowd performed magnificently at Kapyong, and if O'Dowd had been defeated, then that was good night nurse.
That's
There's
a
no
bummer.
doubt about that, because he held the crossing. See, O'Dowd should have had a medal. Even if they gave him a bloody MID, I wouldn't give a stuff, provided they recognised what he did at Kapyong. And I think it's terribly important that see old Ben would die happy then.
Well, lack of medals notwithstanding, this documentary is giving him that honor now.
It is impossible for anyone who has not participated in the front lines of war to fully appreciate the comradeship of veterans, where everyone shares
And
the
of brothers.
senses the agonies and the fears of death, the meaningful acts of bravery, sacrifices for a comrade, the joy of survival.
To how I felt towards the Chinese, they're in the same position as us. Their government says we're going to war. We go to war, like a Second World War. I have nothing against them. Get drafted in, eh? They don't want to go. I'm positive of it. I have no hate against them.
When we would defeat a position and take it, the troops would obviously search the bodies. But what would they discover in the main? Pictures of loved ones, babies, wives, children. They, like us, were ordered to fight.
Just let that sink in.
The Korean War has long gone. It doesn't matter now. It doesn't matter to me anymore. Who cares? Whether the war is good or bad, it's up to the politicians. I'm done with it.
War has no pity. So many people die. It doesn't matter which side won. Chinese die, Koreans die, Americans die. So many die. So, it would be best if there was no more war.
Truer words never have been spoken.
After Kapyong, the Chinese never again mount a major offensive. The Korean conflict changes to a static trench war, and it takes 2 years before a truce is signed. The truce redivides South and North Korea more or less along the same dividing line as before. The two Koreas remain divided to this day.
Yep. We know that all too well. Well, guys, I would normally end this with some kind of brief to not so brief commentary, but the way that concluded with hearing from those soldiers themselves, what could I add to that that would have any good meaning at this point? So I think I'm just going to leave it there. Thanks for watching.